insert the usual shilling, like, comment, subscribe rate. Now, when you start a series, a book, a world, I think it's important to have something that can grab you in, like the first opening line. And the Horus Heresy does this very well in the Horus Rising with the sentence, "I was there the day Horus slew the Emperor." That's good, that brings you in, that makes you feel something, you get engaged into it. Lords of the Lands doesn't do that. Now, granted, there are many examples where books don't really grab you in with the first line, but they're still pretty good books. The problem is that Lord of the Lands isn't one of those. It's a bad start for Warhammer the Old World, and it's probably the worst way you can start or restart Warhammer Fantasy. Now, granted, Warhammer literature isn't really high-end literature. It's not Joanna Karenina, it's not your Dostoevsky brothers, it's not War and Peace or Peace and War, I can't remember it in English. But at the end of the day, it's still good literature. It works, it does its job. And that's what's important. The thing is that Lords of the Lands doesn't do it. First of all, I have a buddy that says that this is Age of Sigmar, the Old World, and not Warhammer Fantasy, the Old World. And I joke about it being Fire Emblem, and this being a Fire Emblem novel. And I think both assumptions are pretty much correct. Now, here's the thing. Pegasus Knights are now fully female. Like, all the Pegasus Knights that are in this book are women. So now you understand what I mean by Fire Emblem. But it's badly written. Look at this. Every woman that's in this book, with the exception of one who's a mindless beast, is technically a girl boss. There's a bunch of girl boss writing in this book where the women are always better, they're always so flawless, their plans always work, and so on. And that's not really good for a story, especially because it's just the Marvel Slop type of writing. It's the type of writing that you would see in a game that decided to change its core audience to an audience that doesn't exist. And as we know, that's pretty bad. But that could be passable. You see, Warhammer does not lack its count of strong women characters. At the end of the day, there are many powerful women in 40k and even in fantasy, and they're good characters. The problem is that they're good characters with flaws and defects and so on, while the characters here in Lords of the Lands are again the Marvel slop writing. It's what you see in Captain Marvel. At the end of the day, it's exactly the same slop. They're always strong, they're always powerful, their plans are always right. They always chastise, like the one male protagonist of this book, Varro, which I really feel bad for him because this book might as well be called Everybody Hates Varro. Spoiler alert, I guess. Varro has a lover, and the lover gets picked to be a handmaiden of the Lady of the Lake. Okay, that's interesting. They reunite during this whole quest of the book to go to Nehekara and save the son of a lord. And then at some point he tries to protect her and she says that she's not weak, she's stronger than he is. There's always women screaming at him. Why not? The women are always wittier than him and wittier than anybody else because, duh, it's Marvel writing. And at the end of the book where both our protagonists, Carolina, the female knight, who is also important in this story, when both of them, she and Varro, get their story and their final battle at the end, it doesn't go well for Varro. And it's not because he loses, it's because he doesn't get his battle. Carolina and some female knights, they get to slay the big evil queen that the Tomb Kings resurrected and save the day and so on. But Varro doesn't get to do that. No, he doesn't get to do that. You see, when they started this quest, they had a Grail Knight with them. The Grail Knight dies, his sword disappears and so on. At some point, a handmaiden of the Lady of the Lake dies. Varro and Carolina go to... Carolina. They go to the realm of the lady and everything's nice there, and this dying handmaiden wants to offer Varro, Garo's a good character, the sword of that Grail Knight, but he refuses, instead saying she should have it. In the end, he gets the sword, like she gives the sword to him, but it's not his hands that deal the killing blow to the lich that control the undead army. No, he fights the Grail Knight who was resurrected. You would expect this to be a very important moment in his story and his progression and all this book and everything he went through, and he gets his moment. He doesn't really get his moment because his former lover, now a handmaiden, comes and tells him to give the sword to the knight, to the Grail Knight, who takes it and then slays the Lich King. The Lich Priest. Carolina doesn't have that problem. You have to understand that Carolina doesn't have that problem. She and a few of her knights, who are also women, slay the evil queen, and they manage to win at the end. You understand what I mean by everybody hates Varro? I don't think anybody likes him. Now, there is some romance between Varro and Carolina. I think that's what I'm going to call her, Carolina. But it's a little bit weird, it's kind of out of focus, you kind of expect it to happen and it leads nowhere. On the other hand, you have almost a sex scene in, what's it called, in the tomb of the queen, of the Tomb Queen, yeah. In her tomb, this Pegasus Knight, who's a woman and another important character in the story, almost sleeps with this deaf guy in the tomb. I'm not even joking, in the tomb. Which really, you can cut that scene out and change it in a way that makes the book more normal. Because at this point, it's not really normal at all. The deaf character is also an interesting one because he is a noble technically, but his papa doesn't love him. And it's because he got a weird pox when he was 7 years old. His mother died because of the pox and he lost his hearing. The dude can speak in sign language and also talk, which, okay, granted, that's something that happens. But my biggest problem is that in the audiobook of it, when he does speak, the guy that reads made him sound mentally challenged. Which, you know what, might be saying more about me, but from what I've seen, it seems like people that lost their hearing late in life and weren't born deaf can speak pretty normally, like I am doing right now, but those that were born without it have a weirder speech pattern when they can talk. But this guy just sounds mentally challenged. And granted, it's probably not the fault of the reader, because he had to endure 12 hours of Marvel slop that's pretending to be Warhammer. But you know what, enough with these whole bad points. Let's look at something good. The fight scenes. The women dominate the fight scenes. Moving on, there's this school scene that I think is the only part of the book that I really liked. And is this handmaiden, the former lover of Varro, who's taken by a carrion king on his weird bat werewolf thing, whose name I can't remember and will probably forget if I read it out loud. And she takes her in the sky, and there's this other knight errant that climbed on the beast before it flew with her, and slowly he's making his way towards the carrion king. She tries to become a nice bait, this handmaiden, and the carrion king isn't dumb, he won't take it, until he does, because that. And then the knight just stabs him in the chest with it, and then the handmaiden stabs the carrion king with her blessed knife, and they just fall to the ground. I think that was a very well written fight scene, and I think it's one of the better scenes when it comes to actual combat and action in it. I really feel like that's the best there is for this book, which is really a damn shame when you have a whole book about Bretonnian knights and how they're fighting the Tomb Kings and the undeads of the desert. There's a lot of things you can do, but I feel like that was the most important one, and they were fighting flesh eaters, ghouls there. They weren't even fighting your regular mummies. Overall, the book is just mostly boring. What makes it even worse is the fact that it's not that good, not even for what Warhammer should be. Like, if you compare this to Archeon, any of those two books from the duology, it just dwarfs. The Archeon books are a tier above it, a few tiers above it, in fact. They just dwarf this Lord of the Lands book horribly. And here's the problem. If it was just one book and a long series, then it would be understandable. The Horus Heresy has its own flops, so does 40k, and you know what? Warhammer Fantasy didn't always have the best books out there. But to start this revitalization of the franchise with such a horrible book, so horribly written, so horribly changed, now I can't help but think, did they write this for an audience that doesn't exist? Because clearly this is not for me, somebody that's newish to Warhammer Fantasy. And clearly it's not for people that clearly like Warhammer Fantasy. The book really feels like it doesn't have a proper target audience. And the fact that there are these actual like real world politics embedded into the story kind of hurt it. And I'm not referring about the women knights and so on, which is a problem, but whatever. No, there are moments where Carolina and the deaf guy are thinking about how unfair the whole system is to sacrifice peasants and while we are knights and charge into battle with armor, and the peasants are just conscripts we taken from jails because they were criminals and poachers and so on. And it's a strange thing to see Bretonnian knights looking down upon Bretonnian customs and Bretonnian traditions. And it's pretty weird. It's also weird to see Varro not even get his win at the end, his victory at the end, while you see Carolina does it without any issue and does a killing blow. She even gets this weird of chosen pendant where the powers of Gaia flow through her, something like that. And it's weird. Like, honestly, I don't recommend this. I love the end and the death. There are many books in the Warhammer series that I like. Fantasy, 40k, whatever you want to call it. I really like those books. But this one, I think it's one of the few times when I find a Warhammer book that just isn't for me. Like, I kind of had problems reading Fulgrim, and maybe I had some not that big interest in Legion at certain points. But I still passed through. They still had enjoyable moments, and they made the whole reading experience better. I feel like Lords of the Lands doesn't. Lords of the Lands is a bad book. It's a bad Warhammer book. And I feel like this does nothing for Warhammer, the old world, when you have something like this. It's not good to start your new series with a book this horrible. Let's look at another bad series that Games Workshop put out. One that's not as beloved, it has its moments as well. And that's The Beast Arises. Now, The Beast Arises, the first book, I Am Slaughter, written by Dan Abnett, is a good book. At the end of the day, that's a good book. It gets you into the series, even if the series kind of sucks. This does nothing. And you have to understand, Warhammer the Old World is supposed to be a changing narrative, explosion, whatever. It's supposed to be something that's going to evolve. But I don't see it evolving if it just continues with this level of writing. It's horrible. And it's awful to see that what's supposed to be another big franchise for Games Workshop and for the Warhammer universe to be turned into Age of Sigmar's sloppy seconds. Because that's what it really feels like at the end of the day. I don't recommend buying it. I don't recommend spending your time listening to the audiobook. I don't recommend this book at all. Because if you are a Warhammer fan in any way, sort, or form, this book isn't for you. This book is for somebody else. It's not for a Warhammer fan. It's just Marvel slop you can probably get watching a Marvel movie. There are better books out there for Warhammer Fantasy, and it's kind of bad because they're more in for Warhammer Fantasy Battle, not the old world. But trust me, you would be better to read the Bretonnian Omnibus Compendium, whatever they have for sale, than to read this. Just doesn't work. And I'm sure Graham McNeil has his part of blame for this. Trust me, the author always has a part in the blame for the success of a book and for its failings too. I really think he wanted to input all those new modern politics things. Oh, the Bretonnian nobles don't really like the way Bretonnia works. The peasants that committed crimes shouldn't be enlisted forcefully into the army. And oh no, we should have strong women characters that are only strong, and the male characters get emasculated by them, because that happens in the book. I'm sorry, no. This is not a book you should read. There's nothing worth it in it. It's a waste of your money. It's a waste of your time. I've wasted mine, and now, you know what? I want my time back. I regret everything about this. This is not a way to do a Warhammer The Old World book. If you take the Warhammer branding off it and you just make it, oh, this is some random book that Graham McNeil wrote. Look at it. Oh, look at it. It's knights and stuff. It would still be a bad book, don't get me wrong, but it wouldn't feel as bad as the fact that this starts the lore of Warhammer The Old World. It's terrible. There's only one good scene in it, and it's not going to help anybody. And I hate it. I hate it. Nevertheless, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next one.